Pride Month 2023 is almost over, and I can almost hear the collective sigh of relief out there. For the past month, the secular folks in our culture have been shoving their view of sexuality down our throats. But the question is what do we do? Hi, folks. My name is Brad Bright, and this is the God is the Issue podcast, where we show how God is the issue in every issue. Now, I have great news for you. There are 4 significant things you can do in response to Pride Month. But first, let's talk about what's going on, both what has happened and where we can go from here. You see, clearly understanding the situation is always the first step in bringing about real change in culture. So let's start with a few examples. Last week, we all know what happened, right? The Los Angeles Dodgers invited the nuns of perpetual indulgence to show up at their ball game, and they honored them before the game started. Now, these are men who dress up as nuns, as provocative nuns, and they're effectively mocking every nun and every Catholic out there. Now, I'm not Catholic, but I have to say I was deeply offended by the Dodger organization. Now, understand, I grew up in Southern California. I have Dodger blue in my veins, but no longer. You see, although now I live in Colorado, I've become a Texas Rangers fan. You know why? It's because it's the only major league team in Major League Baseball that has not capitulated to the Pride Night crowd. Now, frankly, I'm even getting ready to order a Texas Rangers t-shirt. Why? Because I want to support them in making a stand for what is right. You see, the point is, I want to vote with my wallet, not just with my sentiments. You know, also what's going on in our culture these days is we now routinely hear of school administrators who are transitioning young children without their parents' knowledge, without their parents' permission. You see, they believe biology is bigotry. They believe that people who revere the Bible are haters. They believe they're smarter than you. They believe they are morally superior to you, and they believe they own your children. And then what have we seen going on with small businesses? I mean, small businesses owned by Christians are being forced to choose between their livelihood or their conscience. I mean, Colorado, where I live now, has been ground zero for many of these lawsuits. Been ground zero for spiteful gays who decide to punish Christians who bow down to Jesus rather than bow down at the altar of Artemis. And who knows, maybe I'm next. You know, even the White House has taken the side of those who say freedom of religion must bow down at the altar of the phallus. You know, Jim CAVIEZEL, and I think most of you know who he is, but for those of you who don't, he's the one who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. He summed it up pretty accurately here recently when he said, Christian bigotry is now the most accepted form of bigotry in the world. And he's right. I routinely get a lot of two-faced finger pointers who respond to my podcast, quit pushing your religion on me. Well, folks, I respond by saying, well, then why don't you quit pushing your sexuality on me? Why don't you quit pushing your gender ideology on my kids? Why don't you quit pushing your truth on me? Why don't you just keep your truth to yourself? Now, we all know they won't quit. We all know what they're really saying is, I hate you, shut up. We know that, don't we? It's very, very clear. But folks, I'm not going to shut up, and I hope you don't either. I'm more than determined than ever. You know, Riley Gaines, who is the female swimmer who is forced to compete against a misogynistic man, here's what she said. She said, when they want you to be silent, speak louder. You see, the other side, they don't value free speech. They don't value freedom of religion. In fact, they want to drive a stake through freedom of religion once and for all. Why? Because they want to win, period. You know what that means is? It means that those of us who take the Bible seriously must be driven from the public square because the Bible does not support their narrative. You see, in order for them to get what they want, we must lose. This is no longer a win-win scenario. There is no longer a live and let live. There's no longer anything about tolerance. This is about ticked off gays, trans, and God haters who are trying to destroy anyone and everyone who oppose them. I mean, that's why the trans activists earlier this year named their rally in Washington, D.C. the Day of Vengeance. So it's a scorched earth policy. It's intended to shock you into submission. In this battle, one side will win and one side will lose. So my question for you is, which side do you want to be on? Which side do you want your kids to be on? Now, if you want to be on the winning side, then you need to engage. Yes, you. But here's the thing. Don't engage alone. You will not survive. This is a war. And in this battle, loners are losers. Let me repeat that. In this battle, loners are losers. So the first thing you need to do is you need to go out and find 2 or 3 friends and then get moving together. You will need each other. Folks, we need to fight. We must fight. But we need to fight like Jesus. Now, I know many of you are saying, well, what does that even mean? Well, Jesus spoke truth to power, didn't he? But he offered God's love to the hurting. And here's the point. He never compromised truth, but he also never compromised love. Now, let me begin with an analogy I think you might find helpful. You know, if a blind man steps on your toe, does it hurt? Well, probably. But are you offended? Do you get mad? Well, no. Once your eyes quit watering, what does a normal person do? You offer to help. However, and listen carefully, if that same blind man gets into the driver's seat of your car and you and the kids are in the back seat, are you going to give him the keys and let him drive? Well, absolutely not. Only a fool would do that, right? In fact, you're going to do everything you can to get him out of the driver's seat so that he doesn't hurt your kids and so that he doesn't hurt anybody else. So what's my point? My point is the folks behind the Gay Pride Month are blind. The decision makers behind Budweiser, Target, and Kohl's are blind. The school board members in your community are blind. The folks who own the Dodgers are blind. But let me ask you, when they step on your toe, on your metaphorical toe, so to speak, does it hurt? Oh yeah, it hurts, doesn't it? It really smarts. But are you going to demean them? Are you going to return hate for hate? Well, not if you're a true follower of Jesus. Remember what Jesus said as he was hanging on the cross? He said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. In other words, Jesus recognized that they were blind. Despite his agony, despite what they had done to them, he recognized they were blind. However, are you going to continue to allow them to drive the car? Are you going to continue to allow them drive the car if your kids are in the back seat? Well, of course not. You are going to do everything you can to get them out of the driver's seat. But here's what's critical, folks. Don't get angry when blind people step on your toe, but work hard to get them out of the driver's seat. Understand, this is not an ideological conflict. This is primarily a spiritual battle. Now, in the case of Budweiser, Target, and Kohl's, it means you vote with your wallet. Don't give them your money anymore. Ask your friends not to give them their money anymore. I mean, that's pretty simple. But in the process, don't demean gay or trans folks. They're blind. Just don't give them their money. Don't empower them to stay in the driver's seat. In the case of the Los Angeles Dodgers or any other team that promotes godless sexuality, don't give them your money. Don't go to their games. Don't buy your kids their gear. Folks, vote with your wallet. But in the process, folks, don't demean gays or trans. They're blind. Just don't give them your money. Don't empower them to stay in the driver's seat. By the way, that's why I became a Texas Rangers fan, and I'm going to order a Texas Rangers t-shirt because I want to vote with my wallet. Now, in the case of your local school board, this means first and foremost, you have to vote when it comes time to vote. You vote and you work hard to replace school board members who push their sexual ideology on your kids. In fact, let me strongly encourage you to consider running for school board. Yeah, you. I'm talking to you. And if you really say, I can't do that, then go recruit someone else who can, and then make sure you have their back at every step of the way. But here's where I encourage you to start. Start by attending the local school board meeting and ask other parents to attend with you. Now in the process, again, don't demean gay or trans folks. They're blind. Just don't let them stay in the driver's seat. You know, in Psalm 109, verse 8, David, who later became king of Israel, he put it this way. He said, let his days be few and let another take his office. Did you catch that? Let another take his office. That's what David said. In other words, get him out of the driver's seat. That's straight from the scriptures, folks. Now, if you don't know how to run for school board, you probably don't, let me encourage you to go to leadershipinstitute.org. That's leadershipinstitute.org. They have a new program to train anyone how to run for school board. But the most important thing you can be doing is praying. Let me ask you, who's the smartest, the strongest, the kindest, the fairest, the most just being in the universe? It's God. It's God Almighty. So why would you do anything without consulting him first? It's just common sense. And here's the first thing I really want you to consider praying about. Pray about whether God would have you run for school board. This isn't between you and me. This is between you and God. Ask him, God, would you have me run for school board? And then if he says yes, trust him that he's going to take care of the rest of the process. Now then, the second most important thing you can do is to make God the issue. First with your kids, and then with your neighbors and your co-workers. Why? Because God's existence and identity determines where each and every one of us comes down on these issues. Folks, teach your kids who God is and why it matters. If you want your kids to behave as though God exists, you have to teach them that he does and who he is. See, the problem in the public schools today is that they have been taught that God is irrelevant. And lo and behold, what? They're actually acting like it. I believe it is the fact that we teach in the public schools that God is irrelevant. I think that is the primary cause of violence in the public schools today. Why? We have taught these kids that God is irrelevant, and now they're acting like it. And folks, when you're talking with your neighbors or co-workers, it's as simple as saying, you know, John, Sally, there's nothing wrong with same-sex marriage. There's really not. Unless God actually exists. Do you believe God exists? Can you say that, folks? If you can say that, you can do this. Now, if they say yes, then ask the follow-up question. Why do you think the Bible doesn't have anything positive to say about homosexual behavior? Not even once. Have you ever thought about why? Or this one. You can say, hey, you know, John, Sally, there's really nothing wrong with abortion. Nothing at all. Unless God actually exists. Do you believe God exists? Do you believe God is love? And if they say yes, then ask, well, then who do you think God loves more? The mother or her unborn child? Or here's one other example of what you can do. You can say, you know, there's nothing wrong with transgender ideology. Nothing at all. And you know how the rest of it goes now? You already know. Unless God exists. Do you believe God exists? And if they say yes, then say, well, do you really think that God says, oops, I got the gender wrong again? Oops, I made a mistake? Is that what you believe? Folks, you can literally do this with any issue out there. You see, if God does not exist, nothing is wrong, literally. Now let's drill down on this a little bit. See, if God does not exist, then the basis of all life is what? You learn this in grade school. You learn this in middle school. You learn this in high school. Survival of the fittest. Remember that? Survival of the fittest. Therefore, if that is where life came from, that must also be the basis of morality itself. Now, in that case, there's nothing wrong with same-sex marriage, abortion, or transitioning children, is there? But here's the catch. If survival of the fittest really is the basis of morality, then why is stealing, cheating, lying, racism, rape, and murder wrong? If survival of the fittest is the basis of morality, then Hitler really did get it right. In fact, he modeled for us what survival of the fittest really means. See, how do you start with survival of the fittest and say that racism or genocide is wrong? You can't. If God doesn't exist and you are not at the top of the heap, you're toast. Just like the Jews and the blacks in Nazi Germany. But folks, if we start with Jesus, then we should love our neighbors as ourselves. Why? Because God is love. So which is it? Is it survival of the fittest or is it love your neighbor? It must be one or the other. There is no in between. You cannot start with survival of the fittest and end with love your neighbor. It is not possible. You see, what you believe about God will determine which one you believe is true. And folks, that's true of all your neighbors, your co-workers, and even your children. So here are my 4 recommendations for how to respond to Pride Month. First, vote. Especially vote in every school board election, but better yet, run for your local school board or recruit someone else to run and you would support them. And if you don't know how, go to leadershipinstitute.org. Secondly, vote with your wallet. Use your wallet to encourage good behavior and to discourage bad behavior. Be intentional about thinking this way until it becomes second nature. 3, make God the issue in every issue. See, there's nothing wrong with racism, abortion, or same-sex marriage unless God actually exists. And 4th, pray. God is smarter and stronger than you will ever be, so you are foolish not to consult with him. If you will begin to intentionally do these 4 things, I believe we can begin to turn America around one community at a time. God is the issue.